Hello! I am a squirrel and I have too many hobbies, and this is another Knit and Chat where we're going to work on a project. And this week we're talking about lecture knitting, or what I call my lecture knitting, which is knitting in my lectures for school, but this could also be knitting in a meeting or something where you want to kind of keep your hands busy. So I'm going to discuss who I think could benefit from this, why knitting and lectures can be so, or meetings or whatever, can be so beneficial, and then kind of some like things to consider. I do find that people who've been knitting for a while may not need this, and just kind of are people that bring their knitting everywhere, but hopefully this is helpful to someone, especially if you are going to school soon and are looking for a way to kind of keep yourself engaged in classes and kind of some things to look out for. Classes are also way more forgiving than everything else. So, with that long and rambling intro out of the way, we're going to combine knitting and talking. So, grab your project. I'm actually working on a crochet project today, and a drink, and settle in, and we'll get started. So today I am still working on my C2C Halloween blanket, as we are calling it. This is C2C stripes. I'm doing it all wrong. It's Lily Sugar and Cream in the colors black, hot green, overcast, and dark orchid. Yay! And it was on a size 5 crochet hook. Hook is from Nerdy Bird Co. It is my favorite. So, first, let's talk about my personal history with knitting in class, particularly. So, I have been knitting since I was off and on since I was 10. Um, and I honestly think it started as a way for my mom to like get me to sit still during movies because undiagnosed ADHD, it's hard. Once I got into my my junior and senior year of high school, I was very stressed. And so my classes were really hard. So I picked up knitting again as a way to de-stress and have something to do with my hands. And I was kind of doing it like organically, and I was carrying my knitting everywhere. I was actually like in the senior, like in the yearbook, which I don't have because I never bought it, but it says I was most likely to be seen knitting. Every senior had their own like mini superlative, which was it said a lot about me and what I was like to do, my little introverted self. I also don't think I have anything that I knit that entire year. I was twisting stitches and figuring out, and I did learn a lot. But it did help keep me more focused in classes, especially if we're watching a video. I got in the habit of like taking pretty good notes and then like watching video, and then kind of like I could pay attention better in class if I was like moving my hands. I also didn't knit a lot like in lectures in high school as far as I can recall, but I definitely always had my knitting with me. I would knit in free periods. I would knit at lunch. I took public transit because where I grew up, public transit was a thing. I was constantly knitting on public transit, and I worked. That was what I liked to do and what I liked to work on, and I knit a lot. So then I took a very long break in between high school and college. I got my hair license, and in hair school you can't really knit because there's not a lot of lectures. It's mostly you are hands-on doing things, and I also didn't want to bring my knitting to hair school. Um, because I honestly didn't want it to get messed up. In hair school, there's a lot of hair, there's chemicals flying around, you're a lot less careful. And also, when I was in hair school, I was walking to and from hair school, had to carry a lot of stuff, so weight was a consideration. But when I went back to college, um, I was already knitting again, and I definitely brought my knitting with me. And I have knit in almost all of my lectures. For me, I find that it does help keep me focused on the lecture. I zone off a lot less. It gives me something to do with my hands. And, like most hobbies, knitting or crochet does release dopamine. Now, I will try and have that, where I got that from, cited. Um, Wait, do I have it on my notes? Do I have the citation on my notes? Am I that smart? I don't, but I will try and find the citation. So, I do have written down that knitting releases dopamine in the brain, and dopamine helps with memory recall. Um, and if you have ADHD like I do, or are other kinds of neurospicy, we do struggle with dopamine, and that is part of the issue with memory in ADHD. So if you can find a way to increase your dopamine, um, whether that's through different medications or knitting, kind of hacking your brain, it all works together really well. And I do find I remember stuff better when I'm knitting versus not. Put a pin in that though, because there is an asterisk. There is an asterisk about the knitting and memory. So, knitting in lectures is also good for people who stim. I stim a lot. Knitting or crochet is a stim because it is a repetitive movement. But if I'm not knitting or crochet, I will tap my fingers like this a lot of the times, move my leg, twirl my hair, play with a pen, roll pens in between my fingers. I do all of that, and I have found that knitting can be less distracting than me sitting there, like, if this is a pen, me sitting there like this all class long, just like this, or like this, and then I'll drop it, or clicking. All those things can be really distracting to people who are trying their best to pay attention. I need one more. So we do want to be good classmates, good office mates, and not drive everyone else to complete distraction. I do have some groups of people where knitting or crocheting in class would not be, I don't think it would be beneficial for you. So basically, if it is distracting to you, if you are, if it's a complex pattern, if it's a new technique to you, this is what I was saying, put a pin about it, the better memory. Because if you have a pattern that is very complex or unfamiliar to you, and you're constantly looking at the pattern, you're not going to be paying attention, and your attention's going to be on the knitting project. It's not going to be on the lecture. And that could also be distracting to other people if you're constantly counting stitches or something. Again, we want to be good, thoughtful neighbors, and not be distracting to other people, and not causing ourselves to not learn as well. That's kind of defeating the purpose. I also think that new knitters or crocheters are not going to be able to benefit from this, at least not at first. Like I said, I've been knitting since I was 10 years old. I have a lot of this muscle memory kind of baked in. I don't need to look at my knitting to look at my knits and purls. I'm pretty good about feeling along. Even my crochet is coming along to the point where I could probably crochet a CDC blanket or something in single crochet in class and like not really have to pay attention to it. The other thing is when you're in class, like say you're working, there's something you want to take a note, you have to drop drop your knitting and either take a note or write on your computer. Um, and if you are a new knitter, you might not feel confident in like dropping and stuff. You also have to be you have to be a knitter that is good at fixing things, because when you're in class and you're not paying the most attention, there are times where you will look at your knitting after class and be like, ooh, what happened there? So you do have to be comfortable with mistakes and fixing your mistakes if need be after the fact. And then the other group of people, or the other situation where this might not be appropriate, is if you are doing something that is distracting not only you but distracting other people. So if you tend to like bang your needles together a lot when you knit, and it like clicks a lot, especially if you have metal needles that are very clicky, that's not going to be good. If you are someone, I tend to knit and crochet like this with my elbows pretty much down. If you're someone who wants to do like this, that's, you're taking up a lot of space. That, especially like in crowded lectures, might not be the best. If you're like putting your knitting project on like a different bag, or it's a really big project, that's also not going to be good. I will say again, I touched on it before, like school tends to be like pretty forgiving. However, there will be some lecturers who will not appreciate you knitting in class. I always say to bring your knitting for the first week of class, because one, it sets precedent that you are showing up for every week and you're bringing your knitting, and two, you can test drive it. Like if the professor says something to you, like you are able to know before you get too far into the class, because you're still in that add drop period. It's fine. Some people do find knitting rude. I have had professors say something to me, and then I literally explain to them. I'm like, I have ADHD. This prevents me from doing more distracting stimming. I tend to sit in the back of my classes, so there's people in front of me where it's like less obvious what I'm doing, and I'm less like if I sit in the front of my class, people can see me and see me knitting. If I sit in the back of the class, like no one's really gonna pay attention. So that are like kind of other things to keep into consideration with your knitting. So now we get to kind of like the nitty gritty how to, where I'm going to tell you things that I think are kind of good rules of thumb, but of course these are just suggestions. These are suggestions, they are not rules set in stone. So the first thing to consider is your project choice. So something like this is not a candidate for lecture knitting. This is why I call this my couch knitting, is the knitting I do on the couch. It takes up a lot of room. The bag it's in is huge. I can't get it in and out with like rustling the bag. There's color changing, and also I'm just not that good at crochet. So this is going to be more distracting for me than a knitting project that's more simple. The other thing I would say to avoid would be something with that you need to like look at the project a lot. So, or look at the pattern and the project a lot. So something like a complex lace pattern, a complex color work pattern, stuff like that might not be the best. And then there's also like a project might be a good candidate for lecture knitting, but different parts of it are not going to be good. Like I tried to cast on in class once. It was so frustrating. I was trying to do a tubular cast on. It was not working. I ended up putting my knitting away. So now I know that things like cast on, cast off, picking up stitches, even if the project is like normally good, like those parts I'm going to have to do outside of class when I can focus more on them and just get them done. So I'm only bringing to class the parts There you go. Let me redo that one. I'm only bringing class the parts that I can multitask with, that I can like knit and focus on the professor. Because honestly, college classes are expensive. You're paying a lot to be there. You need to get your money's worth. Oh, and I do have a note under color work that like a simple 2-color project, like a 1x1 color work might be fine, but you do kind of want to avoid things that have like lots of color changes if you're like always messing with balls and like breaking yarn and like just kind of avoid that. I have found projects that are good to bring are things that are like stockinette in the round or something with ribbing, um, something that you've made before and you're making again. Like if you're someone who likes to crank out socks or crank out muscle burrow hats, those are really good options for you. I also, with the Neve sweater, I have found that knitting a sweater in parts makes a sweater a better candidate for lecture knitting because each part is relatively small, even though I knit the fronts two at a time and I knit the sleeves two at a time, or I'm knitting the sleeves two at a time. It's pretty small and compact, especially because that is in a fingering weight, so it squishes down quite a lot. I think if I was making a pieced sweater in like a bulky weight yarn, again, that's just going to be a size constraint thing. It's going to be like a lot bigger and less easy to work on. So small projects are going to be your friend. So socks, mittens, hats, tank tops, again, things that are like lightweight sweaters that are, in lace weight or in fingering weight that like really. See here. Okay, see, this is a good example why this is not a good lecture knitting project. I've like redone this one pixel a million times. Things that are in pieces, so sweaters in pieces, granny squares, if you can like crank those out and you're not doing like different ones, or if you're doing like single color granny squares where you're not like changing the color a lot, those are super good. Anything in a light weight of yarn because you can squish it down a lot, that's going to be a good option to kind of, be respectful of other people's space and not take up too much room. The other thing is if you are commuting to and from school with your project and you have it in a bag, you do want to consider weight. You don't want anything too heavy that's, you're dragging around all day. You want to save your back when you can and stick to smaller projects. So how I set up my lecture knitting is, one, I try to be early to class so that way I can pick the spot that I want and kind of set everything up. I will take out my laptop, or I mostly use my laptop for note taking nowadays, but either laptop or notebook, I'll put it down, and from the chair to the, like, if you're in individual desks, like, that's obviously your space, but we have a lot of lectures where we're in like big like shared tables, so I basically like use the width of my laptop as my guide. So the width of my laptop straight back to me, that's how much space I'm going to take up. So I do things like I'm going to put my backpack on the floor in between my legs, and then my knitting project, I will show you. I have knitting bags next to me. This knitting bag, this is, I think, the sweater bag by Barley Pearls. This is the biggest bag I would ever want to bring, because when I put it on my lap, you can see this basically fills up the space in my lap. And then I can unzip it and take out my knitting, and everything's very contained in here. This is the biggest I'd ever want. Other options, like for size comparison, this is the medium bag by Barley Pearls. Barley Pearls makes my favorite knitting bags right now. So you can see This one's empty, but it's quite a bit smaller, still fits on my lap. And then this is the smaller sock. It's even smaller, right? So things like this are kind of the sizes you want to look for your project bags. I prefer ones with the zip top, especially this because I can unzip it and then I can fold this down to get to my project, and then when I'm done, I can fold it up and zip it back up. I find this very secure. But the other one I've used a lot is a drawstring bag. This one's from Knit Picks. Drawstring bags are nice because, I even have yarn in here. Okay, good. We have example yarn. So let's say this is my project. I don't have anything on this yarn right now, but I can have this in here, right? And then this can be my project. And then this is not going anywhere because it's looped on my arm, or I can loop it on the edge of a chair or the desk. Socks are really great to do this way because everything is very small and contained, and then when you're done class, you just shove everything in, loop it back up, you're good to go. The one con about this style bag, at least the one that's just a very simple bag with nothing on it in it, is it has no pockets on the inside, whereas the Barley Pearl ones, and Barley Pearl's not the only one who makes bags like this. There's like lots of other. We still have the strap that I can put on my wrist or put on the edge of a desk. I tend to do that less. I tend to sit it like on my lap. But it has pockets on the inside where you can put notions. So that's the kind of bag I prefer, but your mileage may vary, and it's always good to kind of like figure out which ones you like. I will also say, if you're someone, so I bring a messenger bag, like a backpack, to school. If you're someone who brings a tote bag to school, if you have a tote bag, make sure your knitting fits on top, like inside, nestled inside the tote bag. So that way you could even like have your tote bag on the floor and like have your knitting like in the tote bag in between your feet. And that would be even more low profile. But that's like, depends on what you're bringing. So that's kind of the space consideration. The next consideration is noise. And I've touched on this like briefly, but when I knit, maybe it's how I knit or whatever, I am not clicking my needles together very much. I have never had anyone complain to me about my needles clicking together and making too much noise. That being said, everyone knits differently, and you may be a person where you're knitting, you click a lot. And if you are unsure about this, film yourself knitting. Sit in a chair, start knitting, and put your phone. You don't have to film, you could have it face down, and just film, put your phone where the next person would be, and film yourself, and try and listen and see if you can hear your knitting needles over kind of other ambient sound. If that happens, you might want to switch to bamboo needles, or you might want to consider crochet, because crochet has a hook, so you are not going to be banging your needles together and making a noise. The other consideration about needles is consider, first of all, circular needles, because they are attached together. So if you drop a circular needle, it's not going to clang on the ground, right? As opposed to straight needles or DPNs, those might not be the best choice. I know when I work with DPNs, I always drop one, and then I'm fishing around for it. And it's just not the best experience when, you're doing something. The point of this is to keep your hands busy so you can concentrate. You don't want anything that's going to take away from your concentration of the lecture or meeting or whatever. That's defeating the purpose. The other thing I will say about bamboo needles and bamboo and resin plastic needles is they can break. Especially, I have broken them, I've broken plastic hooks, I've broken resin needles. So consider bringing backups of the size, especially if they're interchangeable and you can just bring the needle tips. Also consider, oh, I have it here. This is this is the Skittles little container, but it's a plastic tube that opens, and you can fit quite a few needle tips in here. And because it's a plastic tube, they're not going to get crushed, and you can keep the needles together. This is not the most sturdy lid situation, but if you have this and then you have it in, even in this, in a bag, like, you're somewhat protecting them, and if they spill out, they're still in your bag. So something like that is really going to help. Or Furls, their crochet hook company, they make little leather pouches that fit one crochet needle in. Something like that would also be great. I like this because I can fit like a bunch of different needle tips in here, or like needle tips and like a crochet hook in the same size, and then it's just all together. And then finally, if you have someone who's like really not having it, like, you know, either classmate or teacher, try to resolve it, but just be prepared that you may not be able to knit in lectures or in meetings. It's really, you gotta take the temperature and see where it goes. Again, with lectures, because it is a college environment, you get away with a lot more. With meetings, I would probably talk to someone first, especially if you don't see anyone else doing it, and it might be like a conversation with your manager, and it might be something where like some meetings it's fine and other meetings it's not fine. That is a very as you go thing. So now we're going to move into like what I bring with me. So I bring my project with me, my small project, and I also bring together a notions pouch. This one is, she's Bumpy. This one, it's the face of Bumpy from Camp Cretaceous. I love her so much. But I like this one too because, again, we have a leash, so it's easy to find in the depths. In here, I have little scissors to snip ends. I very rarely use scissors in class as I throw them. That's part of it. I very rarely use scissors in class, but I do always have them on hand. I also have a little bag of stitch markers. More stitch markers. This little bag, you won't be able to see it, but this has the screw to screw in my interchangeable needle tips. Oh, look, I found more stitch markers in here. So we have straight stitch markers at the bottom. I'm just gonna put them all together in the pouch. And then I have this little tin. This was from the Alt Knots and Muse 2320 Po box. And it has a darning. I have a couple different darning needles in here. And I like to keep them in their own container so I don't stab myself when I put my hand in here. And the same thing, my little needles, or my little scissors rather, I always put them nose down. So that way, and they kind of sit like this at an angle, nose down. So that way when I'm reaching in here, I'm going to reach for the curved part. I'm not going to stab myself. This zips up nice and securely, and then my current one in here I tend to put this just in the side, and then I also have a tape measure. Sometimes it's in the pouch. More often I put the tape measure, the collapsible tape measure is the best, in the side pocket. And then also in the side pocket I have the buttons for this project, but you could have other things in those pockets. You will notice I do not have my pattern in here because I keep my patterns digital. So, because I always have my laptop up in class, I will have my pattern just open on my laptop or on my phone. I find that the easiest. I'm not rustling around pages, I'm not annoying people. I can make it bigger or smaller as I need. And it's really easy. Like, my computer, I'm sure most computers, I can do a split screen. So there have been times where I have my notes on one side and my pattern on the other side of my screen. Just kind of like double check stuff. But again, I'm almost always bringing projects that are at points where I do not need to look at the patterns very often. So it's not a lot that I'm, on the pattern at all. And we're just, keeping things to a minimum. Okay, I've touched on it before, but I'll touch on it again. I found the professors are a lot more lenient when they see me taking notes. So when they see me putting down the knitting, making a note, whatever, picking it back up, it shows that I am like listening and paying attention. Also, asking questions is things to prove to your lecturer that you are paying attention, as well as doing your fiber craft. That also just helps a lot with the goodwill and being able to continue knitting in lectures. I have also noticed that people will ask me about my knitting either before or after lectures. When they see me doing, they ask me about it. I never have a problem with this. I'm always very happy to answer people's questions about my knitting. I know other people do not like answering questions, so if you don't want to answer questions about your knitting, don't knit in public. It's really that easy. Just don't. But it is also kind of fun because some people are like, "Oh, you've gone so far," especially if you're seeing people week over week. Which is, and honestly, like when people ask me about my knitting, I usually keep it really simple. Usually, like, oh, this is a crochet blanket, or oh, this is a cardigan. I'm not really explaining in depth the way I would explain to someone who knits, at least until they start asking me more questions. It's like, oh, like what hook are you using? What needle size? Like, what yarn is that? Whatever. I do know other people have stories of people grabbing their yarn in public. I've never had that experience. I've never had anyone touch my knitting, ask to touch my knitting, reach out and grab it. I've never had that experience. But if you do, just, give them a good old death stare. Like, geez, how rude can you be? That's just like when, when black women talk about people touching their hair. I find this so weird. Like, I literally am a hairdresser. My hands are in hair all day. And I would never just go up to someone and start like fucking with their hair. Even people that I know, like if they have a fuzzy or something on them, I'll usually say like, hey, I'm getting a fuzzy, or hey, I'm getting a tag on your neck. But just be aware that there are some weirdos out there who will try and touch your yarn and your knitting. Which, geez, that is weird. Oh, there we are. Found the spot. I will be so happy when I have, like, decreased enough on this that these rows feel like they're taking forever, and it's been such a slog to get through, and I really want to be done with the project, but it's not anywhere near enough where I can just like, okay, we're gonna cast off and be done. It's not there. So, to recap, knitting in lectures is great. I've been doing it for my entire associates and bachelor's so far. It has really helped me. It might help you, especially if you are on the neuro spicy train like me. Just make sure you're keeping So kind of contained to yourself, and you're being aware of your surroundings, which I think is just general good rules for knitting in public. Um, if you have any experience knitting in lectures or meetings, positive or negative, let me know in the comments. Maybe someone else will find your comments and find them helpful or interesting. And if you are watching this video because you are preparing to go to school or back to school for the first time, and you're considering bringing your knitting, I wish you the best of luck and happy studies. And if none of that applies to you, I'm so happy that you stuck around, and I hope you got some work done on your project as well. Let's see. Let me finish this pixel stitch and then we'll see how much I got done for today. Okay, we're done that pixel stitch. And how much knitting or crocheting did I get done during this episode? Oh, okay. I started here at the beginning of the row, all the way across, and yeah, I'm closer to the end of the row than I thought. That is very exciting. So hopefully I'll finish up a couple rows, and this will be one more step closer to being done. I want to do like a big black patch, so I'm going to be doing the black for a while, I think. Alright, so let me know how your works in progress are going, and subscribe if you want to hang out more. Let me think. I don't do channel admin at the end of these, but I'm filming a lot today. So, okay, I remembered. So, should be, if it goes up in the order I think it will. But the next video is going to be a podcast, but it's going to be the Q1 recap. So of all the projects, which is exciting. Then after that is the video I'm filming next, which is going to be another knitting pattern roundup. So it's going to be knitting patterns when you want to feel like you're wearing armor. I'm very excited. So I'm probably going to get a drink because my throat is parched. And I will see you back very soon. Alright. Happy knitting. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.